regret that she was living with, and how stuck she felt, and what a failure she felt like. And the idea that she was coming up on 20 years of being alive on this planet, and yet there wasn't much to be proud of. There wasn't much to show for that. And so I think in that moment she was saying, hey, this is me. This is where I am. Not so good. My buddy David picked her up the next morning and took her into a treatment center in downtown Orlando, and she walked in wearing a hoodie, so her arms were covered. That's a pleasant ring. The nurse asked her to remove this hoodie, to take off the sweatshirt, and when Renee did that, they found this wound that was not only fresh, but it was self-inflicted. And it was the combination of the wound and the drugs that were still in her system. Because of the two, they actually denied her entry into treatment. They said that if she could stay clean, if she could stay sober, if she could not hurt herself for 5 days, that she'd be welcome back at that time. And so she spent the next 5 days with my friends and I, living in our living room and coming down, first day sober in a long time, kind of coming back to life. And we stayed up late 5 nights in a row, just getting to know this girl and getting to know her story. Parts of it were really painful, parts of it were really difficult. Things that had happened to her going back to when she was a little girl, and ways that she tried to cope, ways that she tried to run, and ways that it just didn't work, it didn't satisfy. And that in her broken attempts to find healing, it just led to more abuse, and it led to more pain. It led to depression and addiction. And then in the midst of that, we talked about these other words, these other ideas or possibilities, like sobriety and like starting over and like forgiveness and letting go. And I think what she was asking was, hey, are these words real? Like, are these words possible? Can I have them? Can I hold on to them? And she talked about how she loved music, and 2 of the 5 nights that we spent together, we took her to shows just so that she could be in the room with music, just because she said songs had this funny way of being almost like friends, and she felt understood by these songs, and so we took her to be in the room with music. I asked her this weird, vulnerable question. I just said, hey, what if we told your story? What do you think about the possibility of telling your story? And instead of the no that I was expecting, she kind of lit up and smiled and said she loved the possibility that maybe there could be a purpose for her pain. Maybe someone else could relate, maybe someone else could find hope, maybe someone else could even stay alive or get help because we told this story. And after 5 days together, she checked into treatment, and I sat down and started writing, and this thing came quickly. It was a couple pages long. At first, we felt like we had run into this kind of roadblock, which was that, hey, a story has to start somewhere, and a story has to end somewhere, and we could probably find a place to start, but man, we don't have an ending. We certainly don't have the ending that we're hoping for. And we kind of felt stuck in that. And then as we kept talking, we came to this other place, which was that, hey, maybe a story that's not all better, maybe a story that doesn't yet have this happy, hopeful ending, maybe a story where there's a lot up in the air, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of questions. Maybe that's a story that a lot of people can relate to, because maybe that's the place that a lot of people live. And that felt true 5.5 years ago when we had that conversation, and for me, that feels true tonight. And when I think about my friends and my family and what they're in the middle of, for a lot of them, that seems true. And maybe you can relate to that, where you feel like you're very much in the middle of your story, and there's a lot that it's hard to tell how it's going to play out. I wrote a couple pages and kept coming back to this phrase that I had used in the story, and wondering if this phrase was supposed to be the title. The phrase was to write love on her arms. And what it was a goal. And it was a goal that went back to this word that my friend had believed on her body. And it was the idea that if that word was about identity, then this goal was about identity. And it was about believing that she deserved better, that a better life was possible for her. And we were trying to believe that and hope and invite her to believing that. And I felt like, man, that's a weird title. Like, that looks like a band name. That's strange. It's not very good. And yet something felt appropriate about it, like something felt important about it. And sent the story out to some friends and family, and just sent it out as an email, and was really encouraged by the response, was really surprised by people saying it challenged them, it moved them, people saying they cried, people saying it reminded them of someone they had known, someone they had lost. Maybe it reminded them of a conversation that was long overdue. And then, I don't know how inspiration happens exactly. I don't know what it looks like for you, where it comes from, but there was this need that we realized, which was that, hey, Renee's treatment is going to cost money. Her family doesn't have much money. She doesn't have any money. So there's some bills that are starting to come in, and how are those bills going to be paid? And I found myself at a Coldplay show, and this was March 2006. It was the X and Y tour that they were out on. And for me that night, I think there was something about being in the room with 15,000 people and singing Fix You and wanting to be friends with Chris Martin and just kind of getting swept up in the whole thing. And somehow walked out of this concert committed to these two ideas. And the first was that we're